You wrote this really interesting piece for The Guardian about the Internet of Things and making people predictable. What are you worried about, and how does this tie into your interest in Turing?
Well, so the project. Do you want me to hold it? Sure. Yeah. So the project I'm working on is thinking about what it means to be human in the 21st century, and the idea is thinking a bit about how we relate to our technologies and how different technological and social tools are affecting our behavior. And so my concern, and then we kind of lay it out in this in a very brief fashion in the article in The Guardian, has to do with techno-social engineering, which is a term of art that we use to sort of I use to capture the idea of nudging, manipulation, influence, things that we do with each other pretty much on a regular basis. But the concern I have is when we use technological and social tools to shape who we are. And so I guess you might say I'm more concerned with the reference to the Turing test. Turing was concerned with, how would we know when we've created an intelligent machine? And I'm not really interested in intelligent machines. I'm interested in knowing when we have unintelligent humans or unintelligent people.
How common are unintelligent people?
Well, I think there's plenty of unintelligent people. There's a variance there, for sure. But by unintelligent people, what I mean by that, it really is more of a metaphor, is to think about when we as human beings become indistinguishable from a machine. So what Turing did, which was the wonderful move that he made, was to say, I want to figure out, how would we know when a machine has become intelligent? And he said, well, it's very hard to define what intelligent exactly is. It's a really difficult definitional question. So instead of defining it, he said, well, why don't we judge machines against the baseline of humans, right? So if a machine was indistinguishable from a human with respect to intelligence, with respect to a set of questions or stimuli that we asked of the machine, well, that would tell us we've got a remarkable machine on our hands, right? And so the idea I have is to ask the question from the opposite side of the Turing line, the line between humans and machines. Let's use machines as a baseline against which to judge or evaluate humans or our behavior in different technological contexts. So when do we act in a machine-like manner? When do we act in a machine-like manner with regard to different aspects of intelligence? It could be do we retain our common sense? Do we retain other intellectual capabilities, navigation through the world, our ability to relate to each other, our ability to sense and feel different things, and things that machines characteristically don't. So again, machines would be a useful baseline because they don't have common sense, or machines don't feel emotions, for example. And so if a human behaved indistinguishably from a machine with respect to emotional feeling emotions, then that would tell us there's something remarkable about the human. Does that make sense?
Well, it makes sense, but for sure. But part of Turing's move was to take this, let's say, impossible question of determining intelligence by and said, well, if we'll set up a test, we'll make this observable. And we're not going to try to probe the inner state of the machine. We're going to see if it passes as a human. You use the word indistinguishable, and I think it's exactly the sort of Turing word. Going in the other direction, if you're going to talk about human feelings, how can we tell when human and machine are being indistinguishable? Because feelings seem to be an inner state.
Yes, they do. So yes, it's a good point. So the Turing used observational tests, and so the idea of that I have for reverse Turing tests or human-focused Turing tests is similarly the same test, really. I mean, you're running a Turing test. Again, you're relying on observational data. You're observing humans and machines where you can't see them visually, but you're communicating with certain stimuli and asking a series of questions, for example, and then evaluating those responses. And so the question would be, what are the relevant set of stimuli we might use in such a test that would normally distinguish humans from machines? So humans would respond to a series of questions that would evoke emotional responses in a characteristic way and would allow us to maybe distinguish between humans and machines. And then the question
way in terms of verbal response or producing tears, right? I assume not producing tears.
Well, that's the interesting thing. So I haven't worked through what the design of like an emotional test would be, but it could be purely based on verbal stimuli, question and answer. But you could have also some other way to get at sort of reactions. I hadn't thought about so you wouldn't have tears because you wouldn't have a machine that would also have tears. So you couldn't use a test. You couldn't have a test that would be distinguishable because the design inherently leads the machine to sort of fail.
You could judge laughter, but how do you know if the machine has gotten the joke? Or the person, for that matter.
So I guess another way to think about the emotion. So emotion can be a tricky one in terms of the design of the test, but it's why I'm interested in emotion is you might see it so we've got examples of technosocial engineering of emotions, right? So the Facebook emotional contagion experiment that was in the news plenty over the last year and a half sort of evoked a lot of responses, and many people are so the experiment involved Facebook doing a sort of a blind A/B testing and sort of adjusting the status, what would appear in your status updates in a way that you'd see, if for one group you'd see happier responses or happier stimuli, and then the question would be, would that make you happier as the
It could be our time is
our time is coming to an end. So most people in the Facebook emotional stimulation contagion story, most of the concern in the press was about informed consent, was there IRB approval, largely process concerns, right? My main concern when I think about the Facebook emotional contagion experiment, I care about process, but I'm more concerned with the substance. What is the technology? What is the, quote, innovation that Facebook is optimizing, right? It's a technology for manipulating human emotions. And the question, at this point in time, it's not optimized. They're experimenting on it. But the interesting thought experiment looking to the future is, well, what does the world look like? What is the environment we're in when Facebook optimizes that technology and when they are in fact capable of perfecting your emotions and managing your emotions on your behalf? What happens when Facebook's not a social network, but it's operating through the Internet of Things in your home environment?
Well, obviously, we'll all be much happier. We have to wrap it up. That's so interesting. Thank you.